Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming along to our second SM4C's webinar on loneliness and isolation in the older ethnic minority communities. This is following on from the success of the first webinar done way back in September, which I cannot believe that it was September and here we are in February already. That was really successful, a lot of people, and also it was recorded. Many people watched it afterwards via YouTube, which was really, really helpful. Had some fantastic feedback, which Renisa will mention shortly, and how we've done a few things differently since the last webinar. I'll repeat what I said then. It's obviously a really important subject. Loneliness and isolation has been talked about many times. I myself, in my work, my previous role, have been to many workshops, many webinars, many get-togethers talking about loneliness and isolation. I had never ever been to one that focused on ethnic minorities in our city. So well done, well done SM4Cs for bringing that together. And clearly it was needed because here we are again doing it all again. So lovely. Just a little bit of trying to get everybody to introduce themselves in the chat function, which is really nice. And if you want to make a note of anybody that you want to contact later, wonderful. It's all a really good networking opportunity, and we're all here for the same cause. So we've probably got a lot in common already. Thank you for giving your time this morning. I'm just going to go through the agenda a little bit so you know what's what. We should be here for about 1 hour, 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours, depending on how good your chair is today. No pressure. We've got, kicking off with the speaker from Mark was due to come, the CEO was due to be here to say 5 minutes about what this is, how it was brought together, and a little bit about SM4Cs. Mark is in hospital, unfortunately, overnight, so we've got another Mark, so who's, bless him, put himself forward in 30 minutes to go this morning, so that's really kind. So we've got Mark Smith coming to speak to us about SM4Cs. He's the Income Generation and Engagement Manager at SM4Cs. I had to write that down. We've got then Renisa talking about what we're doing, why this feedback from the last webinar, what we're doing and what we're hoping to achieve. So Renisa from SM4Cs is going to talk about that. We've then got the lovely David, who's going to be talking about loneliness and isolation from the Afro-Caribbean and male perspective, which is really lovely. Last time we did this, we had 2 female speakers. This time we've got 2 male speakers. So well done ladies for mixing it up a bit. Wonderful. We're then going to go into a couple, so you've got a bit of work to do yourselves. We're going to be going into our first breakout room to discuss what we've learned from what David was saying and how perhaps we could implement that, and any questions that we would have for David. Come back to do a bit of feedback, and then we're going to go over to the lovely Wakas from Darnell Wellbeing. Wakas I've known for many years. Wakas is going to be talking about what he's learned in all his years and years of experience, again particularly from the male perspective. And Wakas works down in Darnell, which is a very diverse community there. And similarly, going to go into breakout rooms afterwards, come back with any questions that we want to ask Wakas or anybody else, really, to be fair. Then we're going to go on to any closing comments, anything that anybody wants to say, any feedback or whatever, and hopefully we'll be rounding up and finishing off before midday. If I'm good and don't get my knuckles wrapped. So wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. We'll kick off straight away then, straight over to our lovely stepping in Mark Smith from SM4Cs.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all. And just in terms of the chat, if you want to repost your contact details in the chat. So as Sarah said, if you've joined later on, you might miss what people have put in earlier. So welcome. I'm Mark Smith. I'm the interim Income Generation Engagement Manager. That's a bit of a mouthful, but engagement is really important for SM4Cs. It always has been, and it always will be. So the charity was established back in 1966 at a time when perhaps, there wasn't as much working together, working across borders, working across faith and working across different cultures and religions as well. And we're still there on a big journey, but we really hope today is part of that journey to improve and to develop, to reach out to as many different people people as we can. So I'm sure many of you will know about SM4Cs, but for those that don't, and to test me, standing in as well, just to tell you briefly about what we do. So some of our core services around the hospital aftercare, where we help older people who are discharged from hospital with practical things such as getting to return home, having certain equipment delivered, everything from temporary key safes to getting some shopping for them, for example. The hospital to home service is there where we actually transport patients home who may not have other people to do that for them. And then last but not least, our Good Neighbours scheme, where volunteers are matched with older people suffering particularly isolation, not just as a result of the pandemic, but especially in the last year, to give that support and just to give that helping hand, really. So our volunteers and our staff work tirelessly, and especially over the last weird and wonderful couple of years that it's been throughout the pandemic. So massive thank you and round of applause to them. And they will say they can't do it in isolation. So it's really important that you're here today giving your time to look at what else can we do. So in a typical year, SM4Cs help about 3,500 older people, but certainly in the last year or so, that skyrocketed to 5,000 people, partly because of the capacity, the need. And also, you know, we want to continue to reach more people from different backgrounds, and for also from those backgrounds that may find it harder to come forward. So we want to expand our free services. We want to make sure our services are culturally sensitive, and we can only do that if we continue to work together. We've got about 200 volunteers, and we're really grateful for the time that they give, but we could also need more from different diverse backgrounds as well. So if you're listening to this and you think that you could give some time, you could help spread the word through your network, please do. And that goes right from working on the ground also to our governance as well. We're looking for more trustees that would help cover and help diversify our board and bring different perspectives and different connections. So if you think that that could be you or somebody you know, please get in touch afterwards, and I'll pop my details again in the chat. Thank you so much for your time and your contributions today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. Mark, could I just ask you, would you mind, just in case people don't know, what SM4C stands for? That's not a test for you.
Sure, yeah, it's Sheffield Churches Council for Community Care. So yeah, thumbs up from Erica. That's good. Get my teeth in for that one. And sort of kind of our day to day, we refer to SM4Cs partly because it's easier to say, but also whilst we came from that sort of that church background, you know, years ago, actually, you know, now we're working across all faiths, all backgrounds, and we really want to engage people and make sure that we're there for every older person that needs a helping hand.
Brilliant. Thank you for clarifying that, Mark. That's really helpful. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you. Right, shall we move on to Renisa? Renisa is going to be talking a little bit about feedback and on why she's brought this back together and follow on work from feedback that you've had, haven't it, Renisa? That's what you want to talk about today, isn't it? Brilliant.
Yeah, I do, definitely. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's really great to see so many of you again. And yeah, what I'll do is I'll talk, for those of you who weren't at the previous event, I'll talk more about the project that I'm sort of leading on and why we're actually doing this event, and also talk about the feedback from last time and what we've incorporated for today and why we've changed things around a little bit. So to begin with, as you might have known, I'm the BAME Community Engagement Officer for SM4Cs. I started just before the pandemic. So and I'm glad that happened as well. I feel like around that time with these services, like Mark has mentioned, there's been like a huge growth and need for it. But in particular, part of my role is making sure that our services are culturally inclusive by recruiting volunteers from different cultural backgrounds who speak different languages, so that we are in a better position to be able to support older people from different ethnic minority backgrounds, and we can offer them the option of, okay, we have this volunteer who's from the same background as you. Would you like somebody who's from the same background as you, or would you like, or you're not too bothered? So it gives them that choice and a bit more flexibility in the services we provide. And it's been really beneficial. I think recently we matched a Pakistani volunteer to a Pakistani older person who he lives with his like daughter-in-law, but he's still of course being lonely because he can't get out and he only sees his daughter-in-law really. It's a lot for her because she can't really go out. She has to look after her father-in-law. But once I got that support case together, the feedback I received from both of them was really nice. They both said that it was just really helpful to be able to speak in their own language. And coincidentally, both the volunteer and the older person were from the same like town in Pakistan. So that added like another level of like relatability, which otherwise our service user might have not experienced elsewhere. So yeah, and in terms of why we're hosting today's event, it's like a continuation from the event in September, which was really successful. And the purpose and the aim of today's event is the same, as we want to just focus on loneliness amongst the ethnic minority community. And as Pam mentioned, there isn't a lot about this subject, and I feel like especially in Sheffield, it's good to get awareness out, and also especially because of COVID. And through my networking with the other community leaders, I realized that there's a lot of challenges that these older people face that, like I said, isn't widely known. Or sometimes we know what the issues are, but we don't know where to start, because it's not like there isn't a quick fix for this sort of stuff. And then as we know, there are already challenges and barriers working with older people in general, regardless of their background. But then when you add like existing inequalities, language, cultural barriers, bad experiences, it just makes that all a lot more complex. So what we wanted to do specifically was highlight what support is available in Sheffield, and have our community leaders who support ethnic minority older people to have that platform to share what they're doing, and so that you can see them virtually, but also so that you can see them and like know, okay, who's doing what, so it helps you out a little bit as well. And in terms of what we want you to gain, we want you to be able to just have knowledge of the deeper underlying issues, challenges, and inequalities. But also, it's not just about the knowledge. It's about knowing what you can do as individuals, to make sure they're able to better support older people. And that can range from changing the way you view this and view older people who are experiencing loneliness and isolation, or making practical changes within your organization. And also, just a few other things before we go on to David and Waqas. I'd also just like to say that although we, and also me, I use like the word BAME, I understand, and we understand that there isn't like a single term for this, and it isn't always the most appropriate or agreed upon word. But like I said, there isn't like a one single agreed upon term, and people have varying opinions on all the different terminology that refers to the collective. So when we are saying BAME today, we are saying it from a place where we have awareness that the different communities that make up the term BAME are not homogenous, and they should not be treated as such. And I feel like that's really important to just make clear as well, because I know people have like varying opinions on it. And I feel like the most important thing is also, when you're speaking to different people, just like find out from them how would they like to be referred. Just be understanding that people have different opinions on it, and different reasons for why they don't like the word. So yeah, that's the key thing, I feel. So yeah. Also at the last webinar, although we weren't able to have any male or African Caribbean speaker representation. And so as you can see for today, we have made sure that we have those representations. And so the talks by David and Waqas will be centered around that. And also another thing to mention is like the views that we are talking about today and things we mentioned today, they don't represent the whole of the ethnic minority community. there might be some generalizations, but again, it's just important to know that each individual will have different experiences in different cultures and religious backgrounds. And also in terms of feedback, where possible, I have incorporated the feedback suggested by previous attendees for today's session. So some of the stuff that David and Wakas will talk about includes what previous attendees had requested to talk about, such as loneliness and isolation obstacles that hinder, I think, minority people from accessing support services, and also how to encourage them to access support services when they're reluctant to do so. And we had a few suggestions about giving more time to the speakers, having a Q&A session after each of the speakers rather than at the end, having longer breakout rooms and mixing the breakout rooms as well. So yeah, so we've tried to incorporate that in today. So we'll just see how it goes, and thank you everybody for your feedback and suggestions. It was really helpful to read. And I wanted to just point that out because I know like completing surveys isn't the most fun thing to do in the world, but yeah, we just appreciate the suggestions. And as you might have guessed as well, I will be asking for feedback again at the end of the session. So we'd really appreciate if you complete it. It will only take about 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll send a link in the chat at the end of the session. And that way we can make sure that whatever webinar we deliver in the future is centered around what people in the community actually want and what they'll actually find useful, rather than doing what we might think. So yeah, that's pretty much all from me, and I hope you find today's session useful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ranisa. Thank you. Yes, Ranisa mentioned that, you know, from your last feedback, you got the feedback, you took that on board and you've made changes clearly. So that's fantastic. Really, really great. I've just suddenly thought of something. It might be that you might want to put a link for the YouTube video of the last webinar in the chat, perhaps, just so that, because the topics that we're discussing today are slightly different to the topics we discussed last time. Last time we had 2 female speakers, one from the Chinese community. And as Ranisa says, different communities are very, very different. If we've not learned that, we've not learned anything really in all our work and experience of working in Sheffield, really. So it's that slightly different. You know, if you weren't there for that one, I would absolutely encourage you to take the time to watch that. So we're going to move swiftly on to David, who's here to talk about loneliness and isolation from the Afro-Caribbean, perhaps male perspective. Thank you, David.
Hi, good morning, everybody. First of all, can I just thank Ranisa for the invitation to come and speak and participate in this conference today. I guess I'm going to speak a little bit more widely than just from the male perspective, and yes, but definitely coming from an African Caribbean perspective. I think that what I will do is I like to make these things more personal. I think that they're more impactful that way. So I will talk about a bit about our organisation, just very briefly in my role or roles in the community. But we'll share the stories, I think, being mindful of confidentiality, of 3 people that we worked with very closely or are still working with very closely. And then some of the things that we do as an organisation to address issues of loneliness. And I'm really hoping that when we get into the breakout, that you'll really pepper me with questions. I think that's far more impactful than listening to me go on. Though I'm a preacher, so I can go on. So my name is David Bissell. As I said, I'm Service Director at SACMA Health and Social Care. SACMA is a African Caribbean-led adult social care provider, and we began life in 1988 at the request of 2 women in the community, one who had a son going through the mental health services and one who had a nephew going through the mental health services, and they weren't happy with the treatment that their loved one was getting. And so they came to the community, and SACMA, after a period of forming, came into being. And we mirrored our organisation on the back of the African Caribbean Mental Health Association that started in Brixton under the leadership of Errol Francis. And that was really used as a model for African Caribbean-led organisations in this space. In all the large conurbations, and in the 80s around that time, there really was a focus on mental health in the African Caribbean community, and therefore in most large conurbations where there was a significant African Caribbean community, the organisations like ours were coming into being, and a good number still exist. I'm also one of the pastors at the Church of God of Prophecy on Duke Street in Sheffield, which is in the UK is predominantly a Caribbean led church, but internationally it's much more than that, and is in 130 countries and all across Europe. Our congregation is predominantly African Caribbean, though not exclusively, and we have significant numbers of older people in our congregation. And one of the things that was raised with us when Renise spoke was around loneliness, was the issue of older people, and that is something that I'll comment on in terms of the pandemic and the impact on the pandemic. So SACMA as an organisation provides a range of services. We offer counselling services, we offer a wellbeing hub, which is a lunch club social cafe on a Wednesday that is particularly aimed at people who are living with a mental health difficulty. On a Thursday, we have a lunch club and social cafe, and that's more aimed at older people and carers, and we're supported in that work in part by the very close partnership that we have with SOAR, and they fund some of that work for us. It's probably best for me to just tell you the stories. And the pandemic, couldn't have a conversation about loneliness without mentioning the pandemic. And a particular element of the pandemic has been this notion of shielding and the requirement to shield in the first pandemic and beyond. And I was interested to hear on Radio 4 last week that there's some research that's been pulled together by 3 universities, one in America, one in Europe, and one here in the UK, that talks about the impact of shielding on older people, and particularly on their mental health and issues of loneliness. And I guess I'll preface everything that I say by saying there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. There's lots of people who live alone, enjoy their own company, and are not lonely. But that sinking feeling of here's another day, in all likelihood, I'm not going to see anybody, I'm not going to speak to anybody, I'm not going to have any contact with anybody. When you want that, it's a very different experience from being alone. One of the big issues for our community during the pandemic was the issue of loss and grief. And as a minister, I stopped counting at 53 in terms of the funerals that I officiated at as a pastor in our community. Now, not all of these were COVID related, and not all of them were people from the African Caribbean community, but the majority were. And the biggest issue that was coming out for the people who were experiencing the loss of a loved one was the inability to follow the rituals and the traditions that usually occur when somebody passes in our community. And I guess we're not unique in that regard. Many other communities, the host community and other communities of colour, will have their traditions. But in the African Caribbean community, being there, gathering, being around for people is really, really critical. And people just weren't able to do that. And so the first person I want to speak about is a woman whose husband had dementia. She had cared for him on her own, and eventually his dementia had deteriorated, that he had to be admitted to one of the Health and Social Care Foundation Trust care homes. She visited regularly. She did in her 80s, didn't drive, but was there most days and really cared for her husband. I had the privilege of being there when he passed and the privilege of officiating his funeral. And to this day, he died in the very early stages of the pandemic when we were only allowed 5 people at funerals and they had to be outside. And to this day, 2 years just about later, this woman still struggles. She's incredibly lonely because she's lost her partner and they live together, but also she's very guilty. She feels very guilty because she wasn't able to give him the funeral, the send-off that she feels he deserved. And despite a lot of support and advice and just being there with her as things have eased, that deep-seated feeling of having failed her husband is really at the front of her mind. The other person that I want to talk about, I'm conscious of time, so I'll just cover two people. It's a young man who had an ongoing mental health difficulty for quite some time, supported the organisation in many ways, was very, very active in SACMA, had some other health conditions and was therefore required to shield. His mental health initially remained stable. However, as time went on, and the things that he did to maintain positive mental health were not possible, I've seen a rapid deterioration in his presentation. There's been 2 admissions to hospital under the Mental Health Act, and he is back in the community, but is completely disengaged from everything that he did to support his well-being. He's incredibly lonely. He has no family. He's also very proud. So some of the things that we offer in terms of support to him, he is very reluctant to pursue. And so we are faced with the lived experience as an organisation of seeing people in our community really struggling with issues of loneliness. One of the things that our organisation does is we have a group of men who meet around loneliness, and we partner with a number of organisations and one of the barbershops. And as a professional, I can see this would be absolutely great for this person to be involved with. But because of the impact on his mental health of being outside of any supports, any processes, any programs, any activities for so long, he lacks the motivation and the willingness, indeed, I think the basic skills to engage in that now as a result of being alone and lonely for so long. So what do we try and do about some of this? During the pandemic, we set up a project called Call and Chat. And so we recruited around 30 volunteers and we linked them to a member of the community who was shielding. And at least once a week, these people would get a telephone call, a chat. It wasn't about counselling, it was just a check-in chat to see how they were. They might mention things about needing some shopping or needing some practical support. The volunteer would then refer that to the SACMA staff and we would sort that out for them. Initially, it was supposed to be a service that lasted up until March 2021. However, 8 of those Call and Chat volunteers are still engaging with their people because it's still of value, it's still meaningful, it's still beneficial to the person and indeed to the volunteer. We have a very committed staff team who worked all the way through the pandemic. And I break the staff team down into two elements. So we hold budgets for people and support personal assistants who do the direct support in people's homes. And we worked really hard to support them in the pandemic, particularly in the early days of the pandemic, when there was no PPE, there was very little scant regard, if at all, given to these carers. So you had the NHS nurses who rightly needed personal protective equipment, and then it moved to care homes, then it moved to domiciliary care agencies, and really personal assistants, PAs, were forgotten. And so we engaged with churches, we engaged with schools, we engaged with volunteers who made PPE for us. And so our staff circulated that to the personal assistants, offering the direct support to people in their communities. I'm really pleased to say that only one person, we never had to furlough anybody, only one person had to change their care arrangements, and that was largely because the staff who were supporting him also worked in the NHS, and he felt uncomfortable in terms of them working in two locations. We run a social cafe on a Thursday, and that really is, I mean, it's just fantastic. We have guests coming in. We have people come and have a reasonably priced Caribbean meal. The carers group that saw support us with initially was meeting as part of the social cafe, but now they've hived off at a meeting separately on their own, because they still come to the cafe, but they want their own carers time, largely because they're lonely in their caring responsibilities, and it's really causing them some tension. So they want that peer support around being a carer. And the staff work really hard, and the central team staff work really hard around engaging with our community and trying our best to support the community. It's fair to say that SACMA as an organisation, we're punching above our weight in terms of the city, and in terms of service delivery, and in terms of what we're able to achieve. And that's on the back of some really committed trustees, staff and volunteers. And we wouldn't be able to do a third of what we do if it were not for those people. I'm not aware of the time, so just give me a warning, because I could go on and on.
I think you've got 1 minute, David. I'll give you the 1 minute warning.
Thank you. And I guess I'm hoping that the questions, and I'm happy to take questions whenever, will help me elaborate more on this issue of loneliness, because I reckon that the only difference between the experience African Caribbean experience and other people from other communities is some of those ongoing issues that have been a feature of our lives as an underserved community for a long time, that compound issues of loneliness. So if you came here and you saw the signs, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, and you got your own property, and then you brought your children up, and then your children did very well and moved away, and you're very proud of what they've achieved, but that's left you in a vulnerable position in terms of care, and then you feel that you're going to lose your home because you need care, all of that compounds and is an additional pressure on communities of colour. I think there's a direct read across to other communities, but I think there are some specific pressures and specific tensions that relate to communities of colour. I'm going to stop there because I'm sure that my minute is up. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and I'm looking forward to some conversations with you all later.
Fantastic, more than useful and more than great. Could I just ask, David, again, would you be kind enough to let everybody know that doesn't know what SACMA stands for?
Yes, yeah. So SACMA began life as Sheffield African Caribbean Mental Health Association, and then when austerity hit and we had to change our focus, we started off only working with African Caribbean people, and then from 2011 on we worked with all communities. But SACMA was a known name, so we took the acronym, and we trade as SACMA Health and Social Care, and our primary beneficiaries are people of the African Caribbean community. Our secondary beneficiaries are other communities of colour, and tertiary beneficiaries are those people from any community who are happy to have a service or engage with an organisation that's African Caribbean led.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you, David. Thank you. Right, we're going to be moving on, but we're moving on, and it's in connection with David anyway. Erica's very kindly put into the chat, we're going into a breakout room, which will be there for 15 minutes. Erica's kindly put into that what we're discussing in the breakout rooms. I would say just do a quick introduction, because it's really lovely to meet different people, isn't it? So just do a quick, brief introduction, looking at the questions that Erica's put in there. What will we implement? What new perspective will we gain from David's talk? Brilliant, giving 2 very, very specific examples there. And then maybe perhaps think of a couple of questions on the back of that. Somebody, one of your breakout rooms could be writing those down, and then we'll come back after the breakout room and have a general discussion, put those questions to David or me or Wakas or anybody else that feels qualified to answer those questions. But don't forget, we're here, and it's from, you know, an ethnic minority sort of perspective, really. Having said that, a lot of what we talk about affects everybody, doesn't it, obviously, but just trying to sort of keep a bit of a focus on that ethnic minority perspective and what we specifically learned from that today. So whoever's going to do the magic, is it Helen, to get us all into breakout rooms?
Yep, I'll do that now.
And the chat's open as well now. If anybody hasn't introduced themselves and put their email in, please do so.
Okay, thanks.
See you in 15 minutes, hopefully.
I'll start it now and then I won't forget.
Welcome back from your breakout rooms. Hopefully you've made some nice introductions, a nice bit of networking as well. We're all coming back slowly but surely. It's a lovely mixture of people we've got today, isn't it? So nice. Reading all the introductions, it's thinking, wow, how lovely. Not very often you get such a mixture of people in a room, actually, so. Welcome back. Hopefully you've had fun in your breakout rooms. Is everybody back? Lovely, lovely. Right, so on to the next bit. What we're going to do is to have some questions that you've hopefully come up with in your breakout rooms. So you've not just been chatting and getting to know each other. Hopefully you've done a little bit of that as well. So we're just seeing if there's any questions for David, following on from what David said. What have we learned? What do we think we could take away and perhaps implement? Any questions for David or any of the others, really? Maybe Wakas could answer. I could maybe answer. Anybody? So is there any questions? Let me see. Is there anybody frantically waving their hand at me? Or is there anybody from each room that wants to perhaps put a question? Would that be a better way of doing it?
Yeah, I think so.
Right, Liz, I can see Liz has got a hand up. Liz, would you like to put your question, please, Liz? Thank you.
Hi, David. The question we wanted to ask you, David, is in our group, we're just wondering if your organization does take referrals, number one, and number two, is it just people of BME people from the Caribbean you work with, or is it just everyone in general from BME and, you know, who can get to you?
Question for David.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, we do take referrals. I'm going to put the website address and my email address in there again in the chat. Obviously, our focus is the African Caribbean community. We do work partners, so we do partner with a range of organisations. So we don't exclude people. So anybody can be referred. Anybody can come to the social cafe, the wellbeing hub, but it's a case of it's very much focused. It's very much focused on it's Caribbean led, and we're very celebratory of that. I was saying in our group that a lot of the things that we do, they won't be that different from. Oh, just see Rosie there. Hi, Rosie. It won't be that different from what other people do, but it's done from our point of view, from our leadership. I'll just give you a quick example. My mum passed in July. She had Alzheimer's, and we wanted her to go to some daycare provision, so that she got out of the house, and we organised it for her. I won't say where she went, but she went. It was lovely. The people were lovely. There was no problem with the care. It was fine, but it was very white European, and they did something on World War II. Did a presentation on World War II, and it was all Vera Lynn and the White Cliffs of Dover. Again, nothing wrong with any of that, but had there been a bit of effort, my mum was the only Caribbean person there, the only person of colour there. My mum's cousin, he came here from St Kitts in the 40s. He flew in the RAF in the war. We could have provided lots of information to add an added dimension to that war experience that would be more relevant to people like my mum. But it just wasn't thought of. Not that anybody was being exclusionary. The people were lovely. You know, they were really, really kind, but it wasn't that relevant to my mum's lived experience.
Okay, so just a quick question. So for you, David, having had that experience, what do you think would be to make these other organizations feel inclusive? Is it because how do you think one should work around that, or how would it help with all these other organizations, especially when it comes to elderly in the homes, to make them feel included and not feel like, you know, like stick out and be, you know, like on their own?
I think there is a case for specialist provision. It's perfectly right for women to get together in a space just for them, and it's perfectly right for different communities to get together in specialist provision. No, not specialist. I don't want targeted provision specifically for them. However, that doesn't mean that other organisations abdicate their responsibilities to be well trained, well informed, and inclusive. It doesn't, you know, there's no abdication of responsibility there. Some people will be perfectly happy. My mum was happy. She wasn't unhappy, but should have been better served in a more inclusive setting. And I guess the other thing is that organisations need to be self-critical. We're not having a go. We're just saying this doesn't reflect our lived experience. And I guess what we try to do as an organisation is to collaborate, so that we can share our experience, we can partner with organisations. And also, it is I have to be, I'm the director of the organisation. I have to be mindful of the financial viability of the organisation.
Yeah.
And collaboration allows for a diversification of funding into the organisation.
Mm.
Thank you for your question, Elizabeth. That's really kind of conscious of time, and we've got two others.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Joy from the Terminus, do you have a question for David or anybody else?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wrote down two questions from our group. So the first was about visual impairment. So the question was, do SACMA have any work with people who are visually impaired and link up with other services that might be able to support you? So it was Chris, who was in our group, works for an organisation that do kind of talking news so that people with visual impairment can still know what's happening in the news, basically.
We don't at the moment, and we are challenging ourselves as an organisation. There's 9 protected characteristics, not just race. And as for an organisation that seeks to be inclusive, seeks to be a learning organisation, we need to be mindful of that fact. And so I think that if there is a way of collaborating, I can think of 3 people, older people who we are supporting at the moment, who are struggling with their vision, who love the news, who, if there was something that they could still get stuff that's, you know, along the audio book line, you can tell that a physical disability is not my background, that we would love to collaborate with an organisation around that and give access to our community to those kinds of things. We don't need to do it all ourselves. We can just be a conduit so that other organisations who want to reach out and be more inclusive, but don't have the links that we have, can benefit.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks for that question. I'm very conscious of time. We've got a couple of more people that have got their hands up for questions. We've got Sarah Fowler from Health Watch. Sarah, do you want to put your question to David?
Yeah, well, I'm just picking a couple because we had lots of questions from our group. So I'm just going to pick a couple from there. And if anybody's got a burning question, they jump in from our group if I've forgotten it. So one of the questions was about what the financial demands are actually on yourself on SACMA, and actually, do you know where to go for funding? That came from sorry, I forgot your name.
Akhlaq, it was me.
Thank you. Yeah, about what is the financial pressures and how do you actually manage with that?
Yeah. We as an organisation, we have a range of funding streams, but in common with most Black-led organisations, we have a range of roles that are funded by initiative funding. And so I have to spend far too much of my time as director chasing the money. And part of my role, I see it, is to get this organisation on firm footing in terms of revenue. Before austerity hit, there were 11 African Caribbean-led organisations in this city who had relationships with health and with the council, right from babies through to older people, through to education, youth, all the rest of it. Now there are effectively 2.5. So there's SADACA, there's SACMA, and there's Cisco, which is the sickle cell group. None of our organisations have consistent revenue funding from the system. We have a number of contracts with the Health and Social Care Foundation Trust, but my role, for instance, is funded by the Tudor Trust. Our community outreach worker, Corinne, her role is funded by the Tudor Trust. We've got to do better as a city in embedding these organisations, because the pandemic has shown that the system cannot deliver without partnerships with organisations like ours.
Does that answer your question, Sarah?
It does, yeah. And I think as well, I suppose it's, yeah, it's all right. I'm just thinking, I was just wondering, there was another question as well, because I always spend time listening to the answer that I never think what I'm going to ask next. There was one question that actually came up that was, how many of those decision makers and commissioners and things like that were actually invited today as well to because the people that are here are the people that are like on the ground, and that's great with that shared learning, but actually how do we get it upwards?
I can answer that question a little bit from my little corner, because I have been very luckily been part of the South Yorkshire sort of funders meetings and things. They absolutely knew about this because I told them.
Thank you. That answers my question as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's, I think, Susie, did you have your hand up earlier? Can't remember. Or Lou, did you have a question? We're running over a little bit, but I think
I think it's a biggie. I think.
Go on,
David. Thank you. Yeah, David, you said at the end of your chat about the backstory, the fear that prevents, which causes, the harm of the individuals, and the lack of confidence in moving forward, and that creates the loneliness. And for organisations who are wanting to link with communities of Afro-Caribbean or BAME, any of that alternative view of what's happened, on the bigger picture, how do we move forward with that?
I think we've just got
a question for here.
No, it is a massive question, but I think there's an element that as organisations you've got to look inward and see what you need to do to change as an organisation and as people within the organisation. Because organisations don't change. The people within the organisations change that then impact organisational change. And there's a couple of organisations that have come to us during the pandemic. Some of you will know that there is there's a vast set of a hubs group during the pandemic, and that's allowed lots of voluntary sector organisations to come together and collaborate. And one of those organisations was already on the journey of equality and inclusion and diversity. And so they've asked us to help them with that, and have commissioned us to do some training with them around that. So I think there's a bit about looking internally and not being afraid of having those difficult conversations. But also there's a bit about looking for who you can collaborate with. I know that our organisation is up for collaboration. I know Sadaka is up for collaboration. It's about how we work together, because I think if nothing else has come out of the murder of George Floyd and the 2 years of the pandemic, is that we are far stronger when we are on a similar page and trying to affect change in a kind of agreed way. If I just try to do it in the Black community and never engage with people with white colleagues, I'll achieve precious little. We're far better when we work together, and that's why if somebody says something to me, I'm less. A number of people today, and I've hesitated to say this, but I'm going to say it now. A number of people have used the term Afro-Caribbean. Most people of African Caribbean origin prefer African Caribbean as opposed to Afro-Caribbean. And some will say an Afro is a hairstyle. And so if we will have, but I'm less concerned about language and more concerned about the motivation. Language is incredibly important and we shouldn't let it go. But if somebody doesn't have the right motivation, if they're not asking questions from a place of I want to know, I want to do better, I want to be part of the solution, then they can have all the right language, the right buzz phrases. It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. But it's about, why are you motivated to do something? Why are you motivated to come along to something like this today? And I guess the harder job is for those who aren't motivated, who aren't bothered. How do we reach those? That's the real challenge.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Lou, for your really good question. I'm going to move us on. Joy put a question in the chat for everybody if anybody wants to answer that question. Having said that, we will suspend the chat when the next speaker is speaking. The network hub that David mentioned earlier that Baz set up right at the beginning of the pandemic is still going on. Don't let me put you off by the fact that I chair that now. It's every Thursday morning, and any organisation, Thursday mornings, 10 o'clock, any organisation is very, very welcome to come and be part of that. And I think, as you can probably gather from today, it's good to get together and talk, really, because if you're trying to find an answer to a question, somebody else has already been trying to find that answer to that question within Sheffield, really. So yeah, any networking anywhere, it can only be a good thing. I think we're going to move on now. We've got our next lovely speaker. We've got Wakas from Darnell Wellbeing. Welcome, Wakas. And you've got about 15 minutes, Wakas, loud and clear, because I know you're so softly, gently, beautiful voice that you have, gently spoken. Yeah. Tell us what you think and what we can do from your perspective, Wakas.
Thank you for, sorry, first of all, thank you for inviting me to, thanks to Vanessa and team at SM4Cs, also to BAME for a lovely introduction and giving me space. Yes, I am Wakas Hamid, one part of Darnell Wellbeing. So I'll start, I think, to describe what Darnell Wellbeing does and where I fit as my role in Darnell Wellbeing. Darnell Wellbeing is a local community organization which works in partnership with local groups and statutory organizations to support people stay healthy throughout Darnell ward, which is Darnell, Tinsley, and some of Halsworth area. We support one of the most, as we are in one of the most deprived area in Sheffield, so we support community and community members with a range of tailored programs of social and physical activity. We also do one-to-one support and volunteering, which means people can connect with our organization in quite a few different ways. It can be a volunteer coming in and later on learning what we do. They get support for themselves and family and support the community to get linked in, or someone coming in as a one-to-one support, asking for different support or a group, and then linking in thinking, oh, this is I could offer. So one of the work which we do as a team is encourage people to think about what they have and how they can, if they get the support, if they're happy with that, how they can help others. So this is part of what we do, is encouraging, motivating people to think differently and help each other. So that brings us more volunteers who then link into community. And because it's local, we get quite few volunteers who speak community languages, and that in turn help us and them and the community to grow together. Core activities, our core beneficiaries are actually people from BAME communities, as the area is multicultural area, multi-ethnic area. And those out of those, the mostly people who get benefit from our services are elderly, are vulnerable, at risk of loneliness or low mood, and families of on low income, younger adults who are at risk of long-term conditions such as chronic pain, diabetes, and dementia, mental health. So all this is part of core program of what Donald Wellbeing does. And through activities, weekly activities, I'll quickly talk about pre-COVID, during COVID, and post what we are looking at going ahead. So pre-COVID, we had the activities program running weekly, which included walking group. We had walking group, we had arts and crafts group, we had men's group, men's health group, women only aerobics, and groups around diabetes, monthly groups, and groups around chronic pain. So these were the activities on a weekly basis. We had to stop this obviously because of the COVID, but even still now, we haven't been fully back. We have started walking, a few other groups are online aerobics, so we're not fully back because of the building we are based, and the activities were run through the building. That is a health center, and the main room which we use is still used as a vaccination hub. So vaccination has been done to keep it safe. We can't use it, so community can't use it still now, and we are in discussion. Soon we'll go back to that. So these are the things which Donald Wellbeing does, and I'm part of Donald Wellbeing as a one-to-one support through my health and wellbeing work and link worker work, which as a link worker, I am part of PCN, which is Primary Care Network, and linked to 30,000 patients on 5 surgeries in this area. So that's a big link I have with local community through Donald, and I'm fortunate to have this link because I have linked with the statutory service NHS, and I have linked with community organization. So through my work, I work with both organizations, help them to reach into community, then community members towards them. Plus, for some time, I'm working with other services, and I get calls from social services to help them with language, understanding, sometimes just understanding of a case. And there's lots of time happens that I actually worked with the family and individual in the past. So I could go back and help them with the case. This going forward, looking at what it was today, BAME community, especially male, yes, as David said before, it's not only about male. I think the female, which the culture and community we have biggest here, South Asian, female actually have more problems in a way because of culture, because of the religious activity. The male are more out and about than female. But as today, I will talk about how we, or myself, linked with male population here, with especially BAME community, and that include all of the communities we have here. So I had experience of working with most of the communities we have here: Pakistani, Indian, Sikh community, we have Roma community, we have Black community. So through that experience, one thing was clear: if we don't have holistic approach around things, we won't be able to get anywhere. I wouldn't go with the specific cases, but there was that if we don't look at collaboration, as David said, that's the main thing, collaboration. If we don't have collaboration of services, we don't get anywhere. And collaboration for me is not only when I need something from someone, I ring them and get it. Collaboration is I'm there for them and they are there for me as a worker to help the community. It goes beyond just the need then and there. As we are here today, the links we make, that goes far beyond than just on that time and I need someone. Other thing that through the cases which I were involved with, I think the best thing is the life navigation I see. Best thing we could do, which as health workers, what we do is a life navigation, those few minutes, those extra few questions, taking that time asking when we are and actually on the phone, are we engage with them face to face, taking that, asking that extra question. Sometimes you're so overworked or you're so busy, you think if I'll ask this question, yes, what if they will say I need this and I don't have time, these services are already overrun, they won't answer, then what? But still, I think that question is the main question you ask, how they are today. Is there anything we could help them with? And that opens a lot of discussion, and that opens that trust that this person actually asks us about how we're feeling and how if they could help us with anything. And there's one case which I would especially, I think about 6 years ago, I think one of the gentlemen who turned up at surgery, very lovely in his 80s, and it was actually the receptionist who said, you don't look as, because he was always jolly and talking to them, and then the receptionist asked this question. And because why I asked the receptionist, I said, why did you ask this question? He said, well, I felt like he doesn't look that in himself today. And then because I knew that I have you and Donald Wellbeing, so if there is anything I could ask, if there's anything non-medical, I could do that. I could do the referral. So that was part of her life navigation. And she does that. Recently, she done again. But once she done that, that started a conversation by myself to him next day in the surgery. And it took from there, so I done the home visit and nearly 6 to 8 different services got involved since then. Part of that was that he came back to our groups. He started walking group and he started men's group. And for last 6, before COVID, he was regularly coming to those 2 groups. Then other change was that he started feeling more confident coming out. Because when I went to his house, he had actually metal shutters with a remote control to close when he was sleeping at night, which was a health hazard or fire hazard, but that's how he felt. But since then, he's not doing it anymore. He's coming out, he can talk to us, he can pick up the phone and ask for help. And during COVID, we had the well-being calls going out, so he was receiving weekly phone call. Someone was talking, and once actually he rang me and he said, I can't hear anymore. I have seen, because I've done the home visit, his phone was so old, nearly old phone set. As I stopped working, I can't hear properly. What can I do? And that was the first lockdown, very strict lockdown. So what I said to him is, yes, you, as he's a vulnerable person. So I said, stay at home. I'll bring the phone and hand it to you. What you need to do is just plug it in. So I bought a new phone from Asda, went to his house, just handed it into him. That helped him a lot because there was big number. So these are small things which you can help them with, but that main thing was the trust, main thing was a link, main thing was that he could ask this to someone, pick up the phone and ask for help. So these are the things which we encourage people. If we come across, and we will encourage others, all other colleagues, other organizations, to actually take that time, ask that question. But after that is, once we make a referral, that's both, let's link together. My referral making to someone else doesn't mean my job is finished. I still am here, but we need to work together on that referral now. So it can be both ways. It can be coming back to me, because of the language, because of the other support I can do locally, but then other organizations can do more what they can. Sometimes, if you think about obstacles people have, I would break them down into two. For the person, for the older person, and for the family. The two, looking at the way mostly I come across here, joint family system, it is very hard. It is very, if I just think about a lot of the work I do with Asian families, it is very hard for an Asian older, even gentleman, to live on their own, because the family system they have around before, there is no living alone in that system. The language can be the problem, the money can be the problem, the culture, the community, how the people perceive that is still, it is still a stigma to that. That's them. And then coming from that community, I can say it's something with the age. You're too old to do that. You're too old to enjoy things. It still happens. Still people follow that. And one of the things which through doing the lunch club, and when we started doing lunch club, that was because we've been approached by one of our volunteers asking, can we do something about older gentlemen here who used to go to a lunch club and it's finished now. They have nothing to do and they really miss that. One thing which I came across is that before COVID, they had this, that they could go to back to country for a few months, a few weeks. For last 2 years, they haven't. So they lost the day, and then they couldn't even go out to play. That was their socializing in a way. Some groups, they couldn't do it. And now they're stuck at home. And when I spoke to a few of them, children and the houses, because a joint family system, not all houses have enough room in there. So they don't have their own private space. They don't have anything at the moment. And for them to live on their own is totally alienating that subject, because language, plus culture, they just don't know what to do anymore. So I got few cases recently where they want to move out. And for me, that is not only one person's job. If we want to achieve that, if they want to live, we need to work with the family first. And how the family perceive that, how the community, because if you live alone, family will say, the children will say what people will think, that we're not doing anything for our father and mother, because that's what we're supposed to do. But if the father and mother is there, but they don't have their private space, they can't do. If there's a proper thing we can do, and they can live on their own, they can see the family, this is what, but to achieve that, with my experience every day now, to achieve that, if I got this referral, I think, oh my God, I need a lot of input in here myself and others. It's a housing, it's a medical priority, it's I don't know what else it is. If in recent time, it can take up to 1 to 2 years to do that.
1 minute warning, I'm afraid, Wakas. Fascinating.
Yeah. So the one of the thing was, what could be done? What could be done is the holistic approach. What could be done is the local. What could be done is collaboration. A collaboration from A to B, A to Z, not only one way. What could be done is to stop the short-term funding for groups and activities. Because there are things which really work for 6 months and 1 year. And then we come up with new funding and go to them and say, we're going to start something new because we got funding. And they say, not again. We just had something good and you stopped it. And then you're coming, and then asking them, what would you like? They would say, we liked what we had, you took it off. Why are you coming with new? So short-termness have to finish if we want to work with communities. because people get settled, they like what they have. We need to keep doing that. We need to have more of dedicated workers for this reason. I think I'll stop here.
I'm going to say thank you, Waka. I could listen to you all day, you know that, but that's absolutely fascinating. Spot on, exactly what we wanted to hear, really, and exactly the kind of detail that you've given in your personal insight, which is why you're a guest speaker today, Waka. So thank you. So we're going to be going back into breakout rooms. The lovely ladies have had feedback from previous things and said that the people would like breakout rooms to be mixed up. So you're hopefully, if the magic works, you'll be going in with some completely different people and you get the opportunity to introduce yourself to somebody different. So it's great from a networking point of view. I think there's probably lots to talk about. I could see lots of people nodding when Wakas was talking, really. So similarly to before, Erica's put the questions in the chat. What have you gained? What new things have you gained from Wakas speaking? What could we implement? Write down a couple of questions. Hopefully we've probably not got time for all of the questions, but we shall try. So, okay, see you back in 10 minutes. Oh, sorry, 15 minutes. Helen, are you all right to put us into breakout rooms? Thank you, brilliant.
Yep,
see you in 15 minutes, guys. Welcome back, everybody. Everybody coming back from your breakout rooms? We all had a good chat. Have we all, have you all met somebody new that you hadn't met before?
Yeah, come on.
Brilliant.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, wonderful. It was worth coming just for that, if nothing else, Susie. Great. No, it's a lovely mixture of people. Fantastic. Is everybody back? Is any? Oh yeah, there's more. There's more.
Yeah.
There's lots of breakout rooms. Was there 8 different breakout rooms? Was there?
Yeah.
Well done, Helen. You've done all. I've just done the talking. You've done all the difficult technical bit, which is the scary bit. So well done, Helen.
Get it on my PDR.
Great. Wonderful. Is everybody back? It looks like it. I think so. Yeah. Wakas is there. Right. So we went away into breakout rooms to have a little chat, get to know people again, people that you hadn't met, and to reflect on what we've learned from what Wakas very kindly had to say. Wakas, are you there? I can't actually see everybody at the moment.
I am. Yes.
Brilliant. And I was just seeing if any, so I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you, Wakas. And I'd just like to say, if we're going to run out of time, which we probably will, because this is clearly a very, very hot topic, isn't it? There's lots of discussions going on. If we can't get to everybody, if you could raise your hand, actually, that'd be really good in the actual thing. And if we don't get to everybody's questions, it'd still be lovely if you could put those questions in the chat, and it might be that Wakas might be able to email you, or we could just go away and think about those questions, actually, because the questions are interesting in themselves, really. So who shall we start with? Who's got their hand up? Has anybody? Well, Pam Grant, I've spotted you first. Would you like to put your question to Wakas or anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a question. I think we just did agree with what Wakas was talking about. When great talk, Wakas, and the summation at the end in terms of working holistically, collaborating, and the time it takes to work with people and with communities. The short-term funding did come up in our group. We had some really interesting feedback, some good practice coming through. And talking about short-term funding versus the issue we're dealing with, which is loneliness, which has grown and keeps on growing, and across all ages. You know, it's not just older people.
Fair point, Pam. Yes.
So short-term funding, but this issue is growing, and I was just thinking about how, again, the point about linking up with commissioners and strategies for the city.
whatever strategies we work, and linking up little bits of work really need all to come together collaboratively and link the strategy to the resource and what those resource implications are, because loneliness is not going to go away anytime soon. So just those points really, but thanks Wakas, and thanks for the breakout groups and really interesting stuff.
Great, thanks Pam, thanks for feeding that back, lovely, glad you're getting a lot out of it. Has anybody else got any questions that came up in your breakout rooms? I can see Nick Deaton. Nick, do you want to put your question to Wakas?
Hi Wakas, this is, I don't know, this might be a quick question but a really long answer. Do you live in Darnell essentially, and do you think it's really important to have that local context and knowledge and community understanding in order to perform your role? Very often you'll have councils or different organisations going, we've got a community development worker, they live in S11 and they're going to come to Darnell. Does it feel like that, or do you think in order to be legitimate and have some authenticity, you need to think within that community and be a part of it?
Good question.
I wouldn't say legitimacy, because all workers, what they work around is helping people. It's not about that. I think it's just extra bonus. So I live here, work here, and I sat in breakout room, and because of most of the community, if I'll say South Asian, it's an Asian community, a big chunk here is from the same city where I'm from. So it helps to build that trust very quickly. So someone says, look at outside my road, look at the condition of the area. I live in the area. So in this community, they will ask, where do you live? Do you live locally? These questions can be asked. And yes, I live here. So once you say, yes, I live here, those all things, they will think, yes, he can see what's happening. So they say, my area 20 years ago when I was here, we have this before, why don't we have? So this does happen. And in that trust, basically, if you have the language, same language, that is that generation we're talking about. The trust just come, they just ask you questions. It could, sometimes questions could be very intrusive, because who are you, who are your family, or so and everything. You married or not, or you go to mosque or not, that questions could be asked. But apart from that builds up trust straight away. But yeah, it does help. It does help. I think it's more in a way that it's not, we had Donald Wellbeing have half staff living in Donald and half not. But I see everybody when we come together, that doesn't matter then. We all work together, one goal, let's help people in which way. But being in this area and knowing what's happening does help.
Brilliant question and brilliantly answered, dare I say. Thank you, Wakas. Next question, Shakila, you've got your hand up. You've got a question for Wakas?
A sort of question. I agree with everything you're saying, Wakas, 100%. You're brilliant. You do a fantastic job. I've met you on many, well, not many, a few of these Zooms. But in response to what Nick was saying, can I also add something that, to add to what Wakas has said, is that Nick, you're right. There is a point of you're an outside, not you, but coming from outside as a white, maybe community development worker who doesn't understand the communities. But at the same time, you need to get there. You need to understand the issues, and you need to go back to your respective organizations and in your your speech, explain what Wakas is saying and help get the funding and the support and the sustainability, because otherwise the BME groups or whatever you want to call them are just going to be sitting there frustrated and not communicating their messages. Because yeah, Wakas can talk to his own community fantastically, but he needs the support of white mainstream organizations to then listen, go away, bring some money, bring some resources, bring some funding and support, and then come and talk to Wakas and the community that he's working with. At some point, it's not good enough saying, oh, we don't understand the communities and it's too hard to go and work with them. No, you have to overcome those barriers, because otherwise nothing's going to change. And this isn't directed at you, Nick. This is just like a kind of organizational sort of white kind of, culture thing. This is a different topic, so yeah.
Thank you, Sheffield. Thank you for that. Thank you for that insight.
Just quickly, Pam, I'll just say, like I always say, if you want to work on long-term conditions, you have to have long-term strategy, long-term groups, long-term help. Same, I think the loneliness is one of the long-term issue, and we don't have long-term planning for that. And we all come in that, but again, the resources is the supporting the right people who can help in that. We just get 6 months or 1 year and this funding and that funding. It shouldn't be like that. It has to be long-term plan, 5-year, 10-year, then see what happens.
Wouldn't that be lovely, Wakas? Yes, yeah. Next question, we've got Sarah Fowler from Health Watch. Sarah?
Hi, I'll be really quick because I can see time. Yeah, again, agree with everything that you're saying, Wakas. In our group, we kind of had the discussions about, well, there was lots of discussion. I'm looking down at my notes because I wrote them down, but about just the mental and physical exhaustion of just not knowing what to do. The groups ended because of COVID, and then the guidelines were so wishy-washy that people felt, what do I do? I'm shielding, I'm not shielding, I'm caring. And it was all kind of really, really getting a bit much. And that in itself is a factor on top of all the other layers of people feeling lonely and isolated. But one really key thing that stood out was the receptionist. And we had somebody that is using support and is part of Dana Wellbeing say that there's another receptionist at the same surgery did the same for her, and actually that link between yourselves and the GP practice and the receptionist is really valuable, and it'd be really nice. I wonder how many other GP surgeries have that kind of link with their local organisation. Yeah, feedback. But yeah, I mean, I'm not asking you to, I don't expect you to know the answer to that, Wakas, and how many there is, but I just think it's a real piece of gold that you've got that relationship there.
And that is a long time work with the surgery, and actually the response they get from us and from the community, the feedback they get, that enhances all that support. But I would say is that recently, few years back, there was this life navigation was actually part of the surgery staff go and do these courses. And same in this surgery, when they asked them, they said, no, we don't need to, because that's what we do every day. We have done well-being. We talk to them, and that's our life navigation goes here. Our training actually is every day. We know that we have this support available now as a link worker, more linked to their systems, so it's very quick for them to make a referral if somebody needs. So they, before it was picking up a phone or at least making a referral on the paper. Now they don't even have to do that. The day I was downstairs picking up stuff or post because we're in the same building, and the receptionist was on the phone, and she just paused the phone and said, "Do you do help with something?" She asked. I said, just nodded. I said, "Okay." She said, "Okay, I'll make a referral." That's how quick we over the years we done. But yes, these are the things, these are the workers. And one thing actually is, as others who are on this call, what I worked with the surgery saying, because now it's 5 surgeries I work with, I said, please, any new staff, doesn't matter if it's a cleaner of the building, any new staff joined you, give them time to talk to Donald Wellbeing, talk to myself as part of the induction. So that was one thing I worked on, and I'm going to see next week a GP who's starting. Then I'll be talking to receptionists, whoever joins that. They ask them, they give them an hour up to 2 hours to a GP. Say, go and sit down with Donald Wellbeing, learn what they do, because that's going to be part of your work.
Fantastic, great question, great answer there. And Graham, we've got the last question, and we're going to give that time to Graham, who's got his hand up. And anybody else, if you want to put your questions in the chat, I say we've run out of time, but yeah, it might get us thinking, and it might be that Wakas might be able to answer your questions via email or something. I don't know. Graham, do you have a question for Wakas?
Not so much a question, just more of a highlighting of what Wakas has suggested, and certainly what I've picked up from Shakila adding to that was just that absolute need for collaboration and for people to come together, because ultimately we could end up working in isolation ourselves when we're trying to fight against that. And I just think that that understanding comes from that. And we've got a group of leaders here who can now start to understand each other a little bit better. Certainly, from my perspective, I need to learn an awful lot more about some of the barriers that I don't know about. And the only way I'm going to do that and build trust is through this. But we have to be open-minded and come together and work in collaboration, absolutely. And that's it, really. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I thought that was such a fantastic point, regardless of funding, regardless of lots of issues. The biggest one for me, if we can get over the fact that we need to work together and understand that entirely, then we're going to be in great shape, because we can pool our resources together. They're all out there. It's just making sure we can make good use of each other and bring some value to what we're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Graham. And I appreciate you were here at the last webinar, and you're here again. So, you know, you're doing the right thing, aren't you? You as one, being part of this conversation and getting to network with people and helping, you know, find solutions to these answers and working together, really. We've got 2 minutes left. We're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much, absolutely everybody. Thank you very much to our guest speakers, to Waqas and to David, for giving your insight and your knowledge and your experience, which is absolutely brilliant. Dare I say, this has been absolutely fascinating, and we could talk for many more hours. I'm not putting any pressure on SM4Cs to do this again, but I personally would absolutely love this to be happening again. No pressure, ladies. It's been fantastic, and I think it's raised lots of questions and given us a lot of things to go away and think about. Coming up shortly, next month, hopefully, the Race Commission is going to be publishing its recommendations into the Race Commission report that's been going on in Sheffield. And I imagine, you know, loneliness, isolation, BAME communities, it's all part of what we've sort of been talking about. So one thing I personally would like you to do is to sort of, when that report is out, the recommendations are out, everybody as an individual in Sheffield, let alone an organisation, should be reading that and seeing how, and asking yourselves, how can I implement these recommendations to make Sheffield a fairer city for everybody, really. And I would then also encourage people to get your thinking caps on and how you can come together and talk about those solutions with other people, a bit like what we've done today, or even if it's in your own sort of offices or around your own dining table at home. I would encourage that. There is the Festival of Debate is going to be happening in April. I would encourage anybody to either get a ticket and be part of that, or put yourself forward as a speaker if you want to be part of that debate. That they would absolutely love people to, you know, who've got some knowledge or anything that they want to say, go and be part of it. And I want us all to have a discussion. I think right at the beginning somebody was asking the question about, oh, can I say BAME, can I say this? And then, as David pointed out, African, all of that. I think, yes, words are really, really important, but even more important is to talk. You know, to get this conversation. I've sensed sometimes people are too scared of saying the wrong word, so they say nothing at all, and that's even worse. So we want conversation. We want this conversation to keep going and learning from each other, really. So fantastic. Thank you. So, and the final word will be to say thank you to SM4Cs, because without them, none of this would be here and we wouldn't be here. So thank you, SM4Cs, for putting your time and resources into bringing this for all of us in Sheffield and around to come together and learn what we've learned today. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. The sun is shining here. I hope it is there for you as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
See you all soon, hopefully. Thank you.